Greetings and welcome to another episode of Hearthstone Hypotheticals. This is probably going to be our most controversial episode ever because it is about an entire class and whether or not it is a problem. So let's just go ahead and get right into this because the way that this show works is that I ask a question, people reply on my Hearthstone Twitter, and this is probably something that a lot of people are passionate about, and we got a lot of replies to this. So let's go ahead and dive into, does Hearthstone have a priest problem? If so, how would you like Blizzard to change the class? The best and funny replies will be featured in this video. So let's go ahead and figure out, is priest a problem according to my Twitter? Now, there are a lot of these, so I'll try to read these as quickly as possible and give you just my first two opinions, because usually with this show, I like to go into a deep dive, but I feel like a lot of these are going to be saying the same thing. And I actually do want to try and read every single one of these replies, because I want to try and give Blizzard as many things of feedback as possible. So let's go ahead and start into the first one. Alexandru is saying, I don't think Hearthstone has a problem with any class. In my opinion, it's just the game is designed for funny and insane turns with cards that are fun to play. Because of this, the game should not be an esport or play competitively and let the devs go nuts on insane cards. I would like to see, the devs go nuts, quote unquote, and release like these ridiculous cards that have awesome playability and these cool animations of blah, 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 blah. But you gotta keep in mind that balance is something that's very, very important, and an esports scene can kind of help you keep that balance going. I think that Hearthstone esports gets a bad rep because everybody just keeps talking about how luck-based it is, and I'm not here to dismiss, the luck side of it, but people that are really good at poker, people that know how to hedge their bets, and people that are just really good at gambling don't really share the exact same strengths in being a good Hearthstone player, because it's all about odds and it's all about outs, but you're not playing with simple face cards. There's a lot of nuance and a lot of decision making that has to go into your plays. So Hearthstone esports is actually something that I think is insanely valuable for Blizzard, because it's unlike all the other card games, Hearthstone has its own way of being played and its own way of being competitive as well. And every single time that I see, I hate to say it, but like a control mirror or something like that. Let's exclude Priest right now, but just say a control warrior mirror. It's awesome to see that happen. Now, Priest is kind of getting the scapegoat effect here, because unfortunately there's a lot of people that don't like to see Priest in competitive play, and I'm assuming that's where Alexandru is coming in with his opinion here, because unfortunately Priest gets banned every single time, at least in this particular meta, or people just don't want to deal with it. So I think that's very, very telling about the class, but as far as the esports application, I think Hearthstone needs esports. It's very, very important to the scene. Tacon is replying with, every class is so similar, so just some flavor of initiative and threats. Priest, Warlock, and Control Warrior are the only things keeping Hearthstone from being one-dimensional. Out of all of those, only Priest is good. Control Warrior is decent. It just falls short in kind of the control matchups, I would say. It definitely can't beat Priest because of its insane resource generation, and if it does, it's beating them on the board while Priest can't randomly find its resources. So pretty much what he's saying here is that everything kind of feels like an aggro or tempo deck, and the only things that are really giving some kind of some dimension to the meta is Priest, Warlock, and Control Warrior. Warlock, as we know, is completely unplayable. Priest is kind of causing problems, and Warrior's lower in the middle somewhere. But Rush Warrior is something that does work pretty well, but why is that different than Control Warrior? Well, Control Warrior doesn't really have that many active threats. Priest can find active threats, and Warlock is just too slow for its active threats in order to actually start killing people. So it's this is a pretty interesting topic right here, because name some other deck that isn't just killing you immediately or trying to keep itself from dying. Hearthstone kind of needs a little bit more of a mid-range deck, or not necessarily like a mid-range deck, but something in the middle where it's not always going face, it's not always going for control, but right now we have these decks that just care about their initiative, and that's pretty much it. Some people could probably say that Rush Warrior is a mid-range deck, but it doesn't really feel mid-range because it is always it always feels aggressive, in my opinion. It's either aggressing the win as fast as possible, or it's controlling me until it gets its troublemakers. So I think this is a pretty interesting conversation here, with every class being a little bit broken, but Priest just kind of feels more unfair compared to these other classes, and I think that we're going to start finding some more examples as we get through these replies. Go all in on Shadow Priest for a year. People will still hate Priest, but for a new reason. I think this is kind of true. There's another post that I saw here where it's Priest needs an active win con, and as soon as it does, people are going to start complaining about it, and, well, Zarek's Cloning Gallery, Inner Fire, Holy Smite, and all the cards that used to deal damage, like Mind Blast. Like, every single one of those cards I've heard people complain about Priest. And it's because Priest has ways of amplifying that damage that's just absolutely ridiculous. I would like to kind of see some Shadow Priest where, like, instead of healing, they go for damage to minions, not just necessarily damage to face. I'd like to see them go in a more, like, removal direction rather than just heal. Oh, play AoE every now and again. But Priest really needs a different direction, in my opinion, because right now it only feels like one Priest deck ever is relevant, and it's always Control Priest. And, well, some people just don't like 20, 30-minute games, and that's just a fact. Tayumel is saying, I'm assuming this is now, Priest, I now deny your existence. And against Druid, you think you're a mana generation, giant minion swarms, card draw, beasts. You are not. The Priest is. Hunter, you think you are beasts, face damage, secrets, and death rattles. Nope, the Priest is. Mage, you think you are spells. Nope, the Priest is. That's pretty much what he's saying here, is that once you go up against a Priest, your cards are their cards, and sometimes it feels like they use them better because they have an entire other deck in order to buff up some of these cards and some of their effects and make some of these AoE effects really, really powerful. But the thing is about going up against Priest is that you're literally, like, I literally went up against a Yogg Hunter, okay? I went up against a Yogg Saron Master of Fate Hunter with Lock and Load. I think it's like rank 2 right now, according to like a high run or something like that. But regardless, this particular deck, I went up against this Priest, and, well, I stole some spells and was just completely dunking on my opponent. And then he played Yogg and just had nothing happen with the Yogg. So even though there was a lot of RNG that went into that, it's just a very, like, textbook definition of, even though I went up against, like, a Spell Hunter, which is supposed to be, like, something that's very, very unique and very, like, left field, I was still kind of dunking on it because it doesn't matter how left field you are if your Priest deck can literally steal all your cards. But pretty much, Priest feels like it's always stealing your stuff and doing it better, and unfortunately, there's just not a lot of ways that classes can fight against this because there's only so much tempo that you can exert every single turn when your opponent's healing and denying and healing and denying. Much like this guy is saying, Priest, I deny your existence. Like, that's pretty much what every single Control Priest has said on the ladder, and unfortunately, I think that Priest just needs to tone it down and finding random generations, and they need more active win cons themselves, so that way it's not as frustrating. Canapish is saying that he would like to allow a one-class ban on ladder, and that would solve the problem. That would solve the problem, but I feel like there's a lot other problems that arise, because then we don't know how good decks actually are until we find out that, hey, this guy's just banning Priest the entire time. And so suddenly that reverses the meta a little bit to where instead of having like 1 or 2 decks that it's bad against, suddenly you need at least like 3 to 4 decks that it's bad against. Because if you have one deck that's on top that's always being banned, then what about the second deck that would always like this provides a pretty interesting meta argument and like meta discussion, but I think that adding a ban on class would just literally make things more problematic for design and balance, because literally if people can just get rid of a class, that might incentivize Blizzard to be like, well, you could just ban the class instead of us having to get rid of the cards. So like, I think that this just creates more problems than it actually solves, and I saw a lot of people have this kind of take too, so I just personally don't agree with it, because again, I feel like there's just more things that are going to evolve from this kind of decision rather than the fixes that need to be made actually get made. So this is great for like tournaments. I think that tournament metas are fantastic right now because of the ban situation. But when it comes to like random classes on ladder, what about like all the other Priest decks that aren't Control Priest? I know it's pretty unlikely to find on like the higher tiers of the ladder. But then suddenly like you literally will never go up against any other archetype. And going on to like, what if you have a really good Control Warrior and a really good Aggro Warrior, and it's just you only care about getting rid of one, but you're effectively getting rid of both, and sometimes you could have a bad matchup in both of those. So it's like, I don't know, man. The more I think about this, the more negative impact it has on Hearthstone. Unfortunately for LazyPeon, I don't have enough time to actually go through his entire post, but he did say that he has addressed this in a totally well-written possible new Priest mechanics thread. And I'm going to go ahead and link this thread down below. It has what if Hearthstone were to change some of these Priest cards and act like some more specific cards. What if they like have some more hypotheticals to where, what if you're not happy with Priest and what can it be done? There's a lot of specifics here, so I'm just going to leave this thread down in the comments so you guys can check out LazyPeon yourself. Solemn is saying that I would just add the word random target to all their spells and make it a clown class. Well, Solemn, something that you're not thinking about is that Corrupt Priest was already a thing, and this is just going to give Clown Priest even more power. Like, I don't know what Solemn is thinking here. This is a little bit left field from somebody that doesn't play too much Priest and actively complains about Priest. But yeah, the Clown Priest is just going to be completely ridiculous. You're going to have all this random completely impacting the game to where getting to turn 9 is going to be very possible because you have all of these random cards, and we know that Priest likes to take advantage of random, even if it's a random target. Guess what? Devouring Plague is already a card that hits random targets. That card isn't going to get nerfed. So just like that, I'm sorry, Solemn, but Clown Priest is just going to be completely meta with your decision, and I just can't see a world domination takeover of clowns being any better than what we already have with Priest. Hes Speedrun is saying every time you queue into a Priest, you automatically get the Norse Dormo effect. I think that's kind of funny coming from a guy with Speedrun in his name. But yeah, Priest wouldn't be a problem if you had to make your decisions immediately. So Priest mains, if you want to start playing your class, you better start putting Norse Dormo in your deck in order to start evening out the playing field a little bit. Because maybe if you only had 15 seconds a turn, people wouldn't be begging for your class to be deleted. But this would be a kind of interesting thing to where, like, what if one day, like, Hearthstone just decided everyone's doing speed duels? I wonder how that would, like, change the ladder to where, like, people have to play these more aggressive decks, or the people that are really good at Priest would just play it to its absolute, to its best ability. So I'd like to see something like this maybe one day. It would be hilarious if the Hearthstone devs just literally did this for one day without telling us, and everybody was freaking out like, oh god, the game's broken, everything is 15 seconds, why is this happening? Hearthstone, if you're listening to this, make it happen for an April Fool's joke. It would be hilarious. Roman is saying that Priest is not a problem for me in Standard, as I auto-concede against them. No matchups against Priest, and not bad experiences. So yeah, that's one way of thinking about it. This actually does tie into one post that I will be showing after this particular comment, because I was waiting for the right time in order to highlight this particular thing. But this is a reply that wasn't made on this tweet, just to give you a little bit of a spoiler alert. But regardless, it does have to do with the fact that people do auto-concede against Priest, and I'm sorry, but this is not healthy for the game. I will go more into the stats here in a second, but essentially, the thing that really sucks is that people don't want to auto-concede against decks, especially if they're trying to actively climb. Like, if you have literally one of the best decks being played over and over and over again, you're never gonna climb. Like, if 50% of the meta is Priest and they figure out how good Priest is, you can't just concede against them every single time. But some people would value their 20, 30 minutes of being able to play and hopefully go up against like a Hunter or something and just finish their game in less than 10 minutes. So let's go ahead and get into this next tweet that actually comes from the guy who runs Vicious Syndicate, and he takes a little deeper dive into some of the stats against conceding against Priest. And here is the tweet. There's actual empirical evidence that Wailing Cavern's Control Priest is the strongest counter in Hearthstone's history to your willingness to play the game. I'm talking about early concessions. Turn 1, bottom rights. Priest produces those like none other. And there was one particular comment that was made. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Here we go. What are other decks that had a record number of concedes? And Zach replies with Quest Rogue, but conceding a 20-80 matchup is different from conceding a much more winnable game like a 45-55, and that's pretty much what Priest's win rate feels like a lot of the time, is like a 45-55. But yeah, this really puts things in perspective about even the guy who runs Vicious Syndicate and looks at all these statistics is starting to realize, hey man, Priest is starting to lead to some very negative gameplay. And I think that this is the biggest bit of evidence that I can put forth that there might be a Priest problem and that the class needs to be toned down or at least weakened a little bit with the next expansion coming out. But literally, there are so many people that are conceding against this on turn 1. Whether or not it's correct or not, it has nothing to do with it. They literally want nothing to do with the class. And I'm not going to lie, I have done this myself a few times. But I value my rank a little bit in Standard, so I don't really do it all too often. So that's where the frustration comes in. I don't want to concede on turn 1. So what are you supposed to do when you literally hate a deck so much, and it's literally the most popular thing on the ladder, and you can't escape from it? Some people would just rather concede and just tank their ranks, unfortunately. Dibble is saying, I just like them to remove all the cards that let them generate new cards. Just once, I'd like to face a Standard Priest playing with all of their cards in their deck instead of the 90 that they've randomly generated, regardless of their deck being good or not. So this is pretty much in the direction of people want Priest to have an active win con. They want minions being played. They want spells that don't just find new spells and find other ways of cheating the game. They want Priest to have a comprehensive game plan to actually do one thing leads to another that leads to the win, rather than just, randomly, random. But unfortunately for Priest, it just doesn't have a lot of tools right now. So this is where the next expansion is really going to come into play in giving Priest some sort of tangible gameplay. Because unfortunately, they don't have another deck that really is doing too well outside of like Control Priest. I would say the only other Priest that isn't Control Priest that's doing well is APM Priest, and that is just literally going all in on the random, so that's not really what I'm talking about. So Priest needs some kind of direction to where, I don't know, like Priest of the Feast or something. Like, that's just the first card that comes to mind where, like, it's a really good minion, has a very powerful effect, and sometimes you can just tempo it out on turn 4, so that way you can try to actively remove your opponent's tempo with your own rather than just randomly random. So I really like this idea. Blizzard, let's give some Priests some tangible gameplay options rather than just looking into the ether to see whatever they can find. Maddie Wu is saying to cap the discovery power. Renew discovers a spell that costs 3 or less. Apotheosis becomes a +2/+1 and lifesteal. Give the other classes win conditions that don't. Give the class other win conditions that don't involve control or non-stop regeneration. I definitely agree with that second part. That first part, I'm not 100% on board with. Capping discovery, definitely good. Renew discovering a card that costs 3 or less, that's just going to make the card somewhat more problematic and a lot more consistent in other ways. Apotheosis being a 2/1, I can somewhat get behind. I would preferably like to see the card become 4 mana because Priest has cards like Palm Reading. Lifesteal, I mean, that's the whole reason why Apotheosis is good. That's an entire different argument in itself. Giving the class other win cons, we've already argued that. Oh, hello, Xena. We already want that to happen, but Priest just really needs some kind of other form of playing, like I said with the previous post, because unfortunately for the class, they just don't have anything, just like Xena never has enough attention, apparently. But yeah, give Priest some other cards that aren't just control cards or non-stop generation, and do something with Apotheosis. I prefer to see it 4 mana, but making Renew discover spells that only cost 3 or less is just going to make the card more consistent in a different way. Grandmaster Casey is talking about Palm Reading and hitting it up to 3 spells in your hand and not your entire hand. Renew to 2 mana and Apotheosis to 4 to 5 mana. I don't really know how Blizzard is going to be able to implement Palm Reading hitting up to 3 spells. I think that's kind of weird. But everything else, I actually 100% would agree with in terms of being able to see how it would affect Priest's win rate. Because Renew and Apotheosis, I believe, are the most problematic cards for Priest. I mean, Apotheosis, I think, is definitely the main proponent here. Because literally just being able to stick Lifesteal on any particular minion and also make it, like, deal a little bit more damage is just extremely frustrating to deal with Priest. I'd say it's different than when Paladin had, like, Lightforge Blessing. Because Priest has a lot of ways of being able to stick minions that you literally can't deal with, such as like a Photo Drake, that again is literally not in their deck because they play Draconic Studies. And someone else is saying that they'd also be fine with just removing Apotheosis from the game and accepting that it was a mistake, but I don't think Apotheosis is the problem here. I think that Priest has so many ways of being like on the board and being present to where you need to be able to make it a little bit weaker for them, to where, like, literally, like, you can't just have every single minion summon another minion that summons another minion, so on and so forth. And it feels like Priest always has something on the field after, like, turn 4 has been achieved or something like that. And apparently, Mick Bannerface is also agreeing with Casey, saying that Apotheosis to 5 would be very, very good. Raise Dead to 2 mana and a Lucia in the trash. Raise Dead to 2 mana is another interesting debate. I think 1 mana would be kind of fine with it because 0 mana is just definitely way too good. But I think he might be saying make these cards 5 mana and 2 mana because, again, Palm Reading. Like, Palm Reading really does come into play whenever you're talking about discounting the cost of some of these spells. And Elucia to the trash can, I just don't like this card. I don't like what this card does. It is literally just the antithesis of tilt. It is literally just like, it is going to cause you tilt every single time this card gets played. So it's just like, I don't know, dude. Like, Lucia doesn't really seem like it has a way of being fixed outside of it just being rotated and becoming wild problem. But, like, I don't know, dude. I think these guys have a pretty good idea because they're definitely the ones that are playing the most amount of Priest and playing against Priest the most. So I trust McMannerface and I trust Casey a lot. I think Apotheosis is definitely one card that needs to be changed to at least 4 mana. But a lot of these cards are very problematic in Priest because they work so well together. Jay Furlez is saying to reduce the hand size to 7 whenever they play random card generation. So if you're a Priest main and you want to start generating cards, you better start counting to 7 now. But that just means that South Sea Scoundrel is going to be really, really ridiculous, and that's a card that already sees play in Priest. So if you're going up against the Priest mirror, suddenly you have to be at 5 cards instead of 6, otherwise you're going to start getting milled. I don't know if that's more balanced or if that's more frustrating, but I feel like if that's going to happen, then Priest is just going to start milling even more cards because we've been seeing South Sea Scoundrel see so much play because of its capability to either mill cards or give Priest that card from your deck that they really, really want. So I don't really know if reducing the hand size is the way to go here. TJ is saying, I think as long as card games have and will exist, there will be sickos that want to play do-nothing, fun-sucking decks that make their opponent want to delete the app, regardless of whether or not they win or lose. Just good business for Hearthstone to sell that drug to those junkies. I somewhat agree with this, actually. I think that there is always going to be players that like disrupt mechanics or mill decks, and this is something that we've definitely seen in Magic the Gathering. Magic the Gathering, I think black decks were the mill decks or something like that. Not really the most well-versed Magic the Gathering player here, but I'm aware of like this one combo to where like my friend would literally like destroy something in your graveyard and it would cause you to mill a card, and since you like got rid of a card, it would cause you to mill more cards. I think I might be explaining this badly. Again, not a Magic the Gathering player here. But the point is, there are going to be decks that enable some of these degenerate things, and some of these people love degeneracy. The first person that comes to mind is actually Concerned Mom in the Wild community, because all he does is just play Ragnaros decks that kill your opponent easily with like Big Priest and stuff like that. He loved Turtle Mage, he loved Shutterwalk Rogue, the Major Domo deck, and all of these decks that just have these completely degenerate ways of winning. And there are going to be those kind of people that see those decks as drugs, and you got to feel those junkies every now and again, Kick W. But regardless, going into the serious approach, I really understand this. Like, there's always going to be one thing that's game breaking, and you can't always get rid of the top card. Like, if you have an ace and you're like, oh god, the ace beats everything, let's nerf him down to the king level, well then suddenly the king level is a new ace. So it's just like, you gotta have something that's on top, you gotta have something that's on bottom. The only difference is whatever is on top can't be so frustrating to where you want to concede every single time. So I can understand where TJ is coming from, but there's just a little bit more things that I feel like needs to get done to Priest, so that way the Priest junkies and the Priest mains can still enjoy their class, while everybody else doesn't feel like they want to just quit the game. Sarah is talking about having a ban system much like Canapesh was. Each season you can ban 10 cards from your climb. Raza Priest, ban. Secret Mage, banned. Reno Priest, ban. Demon Hunter mini set deck, ban. If it's a brand new deck, if it's a brand new deck you want to ban, you will be able to ban it next season, but the season where it came out, it would not be able to. So I kind of like this idea. It's pretty much encouraging people to play some of the new cards, and if you don't want to deal with people just playing the good stuff, you'll be able to ban them. However, like I said earlier, I'm not sure if the ban strategy is going to create more positives than negatives, and one thing I'm thinking of particularly if you're going to be able to ban up to 10 cards or up to 10 decks is, well, that's a lot of decks, and that's a lot of people, and if you're playing a format like Wild, for example, getting rid of 10 decks is like getting rid of like 80% of the meta, depending on where exactly you're sitting on the ladder. So I feel like if you're going to do something like this, 10 is a little bit excessive. Maybe in Wild you could try to test something like this, where instead of like nerfing Dark Lair or nerfing Secret Mage, you can just be like, hey man, you could choose one of these 3 decks to ban for a little bit, see how your climb goes. And again, I'm not really fully on board with this idea. I'm just saying that if Blizzard were to do something like this, I would like to see them test it in Wild to see how much it actually changes the Wild meta, because you have so many more other strategies that can be played. And if it can work in Wild, then maybe it can work in Standard, where the cards are a little bit more limited. But regardless, pretty much that already is standard if you think about it, where you're banning these decks because you don't have Raza Priest, you don't have Secret Mage. So some people would just argue that standard is already this in effect. But I would like to see something to where maybe you can kind of interact with what you go up against if they were to implement something like this. I don't 100% agree with it, but it would be a little bit interesting. Jack Rodway is saying to take away the class ability to randomly generate so many cards, give it an actual proactive win con like Velen Mind Blast, lean into natural card draw. We'll see some of this trickle through Cleric of the Ashi. I think it's the new card that like discovers a card from your deck if you healed, and more cards like that would be good. I definitely agree that we need more cards like the Cleric that give you specific card tutor, or you can like get some kind of a really unique effect or really good effect for doing something that Priest likes to do, such as healing. But the biggest thing is, with cards like Velen Mind Blast, you can't make the win cons so absolutely tilting to where people are just going to lean back on their old arguments of being like, oh, now Priest could just kill me on turn 6 and blah, 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 blah. I can't interact with it. So, like, the biggest challenge here for Blizzard is if you're going to give Priest win cons, you can't give him things like Velen Mind Blast that can scale to these ridiculous levels. You need to give it something similar to, like, Mask of Cthulhu or, like, Apotheosis Blast, where like you literally can deal damage and maybe get an effect or just deal a large amount of damage all in one turn, and that's pretty much all that you're trying to do in that turn. Mask of Cthulhu is a little bit different because Mage does have ways of being able to cheat it out, but it's along the same vein of being able to give Priest some kind of win con that doesn't just auto win the game like Velen Mind Blast did. So if you're gonna give Priest something that actively kills people, make sure it doesn't deal more than like 15 damage all at once. Otherwise, it's just gonna be the same arguments. Martian Boo is saying Hearthstone definitely has a Priest problem, and her name is Alucia. As a wild player, I definitely am going to agree with Martian Boo here, because he actually does play Standard a little bit, and he understands that Alucia is completely different in Standard than it is in Wild. Wild, it's probably not that impactful, in my opinion. You do have it played sometimes in, like, Reno Priest. I don't really know the reasons why you're playing it. I don't know what, like, combos are really, really good. But sometimes you can, like, disrupt Dark Glare. Sometimes you can just disrupt APM Mage. But that's the thing about this card. In Standard, it's just a lot more abysmal to go up against, because especially if you're playing, like, Hunter, and they just throw out all of your cheap spells, and then you're stuck with this literal hand of expensive cards where you can't do anything. It just leads to too many negative gaming experiences. I really feel like a lot of Priest's problems will be solved if they were to just trash can Alucia, but that's a very, very controversial thing, because Hearthstone probably doesn't want to ban another card like they did with like Stealer of Souls, or make an early Hall of Fame thing, which actually Hall of Fame isn't a thing anymore, so they would just get rid of the card. But they probably don't want to. They're probably not going to. They're probably just going to wait until this card rotates, and then it'll be quote-unquote balanced. But I definitely agree that Alucia needs some sort of attention. Domjat is saying Priest only needs a tiny nudge to make the game playable again. I recommend their hand size be kept at 6, down from 10, and everything will be balanced. Well, just like the other guy that's saying, just like the other guy that was saying to cap the cards at 7. Well, now Scoundrel will mill you if you have only 4 cards in your hand. So I'm sorry, South Sea Scoundrel has just got this argument beat. I don't think that reducing their hand size, as funny of a meme as it would be, really does anything. Maybe if you were to print a card that were to reduce hand size, that'd be kind of cool. I would like to see something like that be disrupting, but that sounds like a major effect. Maybe do something where like your hand size is only limited at 8, and if you have like 10 cards or whatever, then you literally will fatigue until you get those 10, or you will literally mill your cards until you get those cards out. But I think that'd be a more interesting direction, is make a legendary that does something along the lines of disrupting. Sunraven is saying, just nerf some key cards. Everybody's mad at Created By. They forgot such a mechanic can work only if it is extremely efficient. Palm reading is blatantly broken in its discount part, and Raised Dead is just too cheap for what it does. Alucia is also still too cheap. Alucia going to 4 mana is one thing I really don't feel like is going to help the card, because the problem with the card is the feelings that are attached with it. Palm reading, I do agree, it needs to not reduce as much for the 3 mana it costs. Maybe raise that card up to 4 or something like that. But you do need to at least get rid of some of these combination of cards. Raised Dead, Palm Reading, Apotheosis, Renew, and Alucia, I think, are the big 5 that we've seen so far in this video of cards that just make people absolutely hate playing up against Priest. And all those cards, in their own way, really do warp the game massively. Palm Reading finds you everything you could possibly need if you need to find an answer, and discounts the rest of your hand while doing it. Raised Dead literally only gives you minions that you want, because you're not playing too many minions in Priest, and a lot of them have immediate impact, such as Venomous Scorpid, South Sea Scoundrel, the Light Shower Elemental. There's so many good cards in Priest. Like, all the minions are pretty much good. It kind of feels like you can't low roll with this unless your opponent gives you something or you steal a minion somehow. And just Palm Reading, I think, needs to just be changed in one way or another. But nerf a combination of these cards. Don't nerf all of them, because then suddenly Priest is just going to be dead, and you're going to have to cast Raised Dead in order to make the class playable. But nerf some combination of these cards, and I think we'll be okay. Anthony Matthews is saying that priests just can't use their own cards. You know, if Priest is just going to be so good at discovering everything, just literally make every single card a Discover card and make Priest literally figure out the way every single game. If you really want to play a random generation, you're going to have to figure out exactly how to random generate every single game. So this is a pretty interesting take. Maybe Priest just needs to be curbed in his randomness by adding even more randomness to it. Mackenzie is saying to just click, delete. That'd be a pretty easy, pretty effective way of just getting rid of it. I think if you're going to get rid of anything, though, just get rid of Elucia. Like, just get rid of Elucia and a lot of the problems will be solved because then combo players can do their thing against Priest. But then that still leaves the rest of the meta and the rest of the decks that still can't deal with it. So maybe we just got to click the delete button. What do you guys think? Should we delete Priest, yes or no? Let me see those opinions in the comment. And let me see your spiciest take on whether or not Priest deserves to be in Hearthstone or not. David Finberg is saying that Priests on ladder can only queue into Priest mirrors. That would definitely just make Priest mains have the time of their life if you think about it. Because I've heard a lot of people that enjoy Priest saying that the Priest mirror is actually one of their favorite matches. And I can actually understand this as somebody who likes to play control attrition games. When you're a Priest player and you enjoy what Priest does and you go up against another Priest that's doing Priest things, suddenly your mind is overloaded with Priest. And why wouldn't you enjoy that? If you're a Priest main, you enjoy that. So it's just like, Priest mirrors are really cool when you enjoy them. When you don't enjoy them, they seem like the most gruesome thing ever because there are so many decisions that have to be made, and if you're wrong, it can literally just completely destroy the game for you. But give Priest players a way to play up against themselves, and I think that they'll just have the time of their lives, although maybe that matchup might get a little bit boring, but if you think about it, Priest players love 30-minute games to 45-minute games, so why not just give it to them every single time? Interval HS is saying that I would like palm reading to be nerfed to palm illiteracy and raised dead nerfed to mildly disturbed dead. Yeah, so this is pretty much what he's saying is that he would like to see these cards nerfed. Palm reading to 4 mana would be an easy fix there, in my opinion. Raised dead to 1 mana would probably be good enough. Some people are saying 2 mana, but I think that just a 1 mana increase will kind of slow these decks a little bit while not absolutely killing them. But then there's the other argument to where if you don't nerf palm reading and you nerf raised dead and you nerf all these other cards like 1 mana boost, then suddenly palm reading is just going to make that to where it's not even really that big of a difference. So it's a little bit of a catch-22 where like if you don't nerf one and if one gets nerfed and you don't nerf the other, it's still kind of a problem. But I just feel like Priest needs a lot of changes to the big 5 cards that we mentioned earlier. Chad is saying to convert to a total void-themed playstyle, and I think he's talking about like Shadow Priest. So being able to see more ways of dealing damage with your hero power, your healing turning into damage that doesn't just straight up hit your opponent. Like, I would like to see Priest deal more ways of, find more ways of dealing damage and actively killing me outside of, like, the Velen shenanigans. Because keep in mind, I don't want Priest to OTK with this kind of damage. I just want Priest to be able to have some kind of burst that helps them get there. Some people just hated Mind Blast as a card, and I can completely understand that. But Priest needs some sort of win con if you really want the class to go in a different direction than just random generation. But guys, if you want my honest opinion, I think Zeddy just hit it right on the nail here. Just throw your computer in the trash next time that Priest high rolls you. Because honestly, let's be honest. If you lose a game against a Priest, it's time for you just to get off the internet. Because it's just so frustrating to where as soon as you open that Chrome tab or as soon as you look at the Battle.net launcher, you're just going to be immediately reminded of share your thoughts with the class now. Better just to get rid of your computer right now while you have the chance. A lot of these replies are actually very similar to what we've seen so far, so I'm just going to quickly list off some of these other replies just so we can quickly get through this, because I did want to list every single reply in order to give Blizzard as much feedback on Priest as possible. Adrian is saying to make Shadow Form actually useful again. I'd love to see Shadow Priest decks again. Definitely agree with that. We need some way of dealing damage. We've said that a lot. Jampa is saying to just straight up delete the class. I thought that's why Demon Hunter exists as a replacement for Priest. Yeah, let's go back to 9 classes Hearthstone. It'll probably change a lot of people's perspective on the game right now. I'm sorry, Andrea says that she does not think that Priest is a problem. Check my @ I'll maybe at her later and give her my spicy takes, but I'm probably not going to do that. Bear Nugget is saying just to delete the class. Very, very straightforward. A lot of people are just saying delete Priest, and if you want my honest opinion, this meme I'm about to show you really does put things in perspective about the Hearthstone scene and deleting Priest. And here's the meme. Say the line, BART. Delete Priest. That's pretty much what the entire meta is right now. So if you guys want to see more funny memes like this is Matt at Arm's tweet. He actually had one of his very first viral memes. So if you guys want to see more memes from this guy, definitely check him out. He's got his own, I think he's got his own podcast actually. But yeah, definitely check him out on Twitter. His links will be down below. Raven is also saying that if you queue Priest, you can only face a Priest. Well, something that Raven is not thinking about is that if Priest is even allowed to be brought into a tournament, that means every single time that Priest sees play, it's going to go up against another Priest. So, Raven, do you really want this to happen? Because this means that you're going to have to cast so many more Priest mirrors, and I don't know if you or Solemn can deal with that. Joda is saying, when playing up against Priest, your emotes deal 1 damage, and if the opponent uses Squelch, it deals 15 damage to itself. Seems fair. I feel like this is the best way to give Priest some damage, because if you're going to make Priest deal 15 damage, it might as well deal 15 damage to itself, because we all know that Priest is going to be able to heal this damage back anyway. Every single time you emote, you only are able to emote, I think, like 2 or 3 times before the game caps you off at being able to not emote for another couple of minutes. So while you're waiting during that time, your opponent is going to be healing themselves. So I'm sorry, Joda, but even if you're playing up against Priest and you're emoting up against them, they're still going to have enough healing in order to kill you. So I don't think this is going to change its playability. All right, this next one is actually something that we have not seen yet. Gin and Tonic is saying the Discover mechanic should show the opponent the card you discovered to allow for planning and counterplay. This is definitely the weirdest reply, because this is pretty much saying that the game is supposed to tell you what your opponent has, and I just can't get on board with that. The more I thought about this, the more I just definitely have to disagree with it, even if it is a joke, because unfortunately, like, the whole point of Discover is to give you an option that your opponent has to think about. Like, your opponent's literally not supposed to be able to play around these random generated cards. They're literally just supposed to be able to play their deck, and if their opponent found the answer, then they can just, continue the game in one way or another. But if you literally know what your opponent is if you literally know what they find, it's just, it's a slippery slope, dude. I don't really know if this is something that's good, because then that means that every single Discover in every single format is going to be something that your opponent can see. So I really don't know if I want that to be in my game. Like cards like Shadow Visions, for example, being able to discover something from my deck. I really want that to be useful if I'm playing like some kind of Priest meme or something. So the more I think about this, the more I'm just not on board with it. Steven Georgiou, and fun fact, this is actually the father of Cora, one of the game designers. He's saying that yes, there is a Priest problem. First, they need to stop lying and covering it up. Second, the bad priests need to be convicted and sent to jail. Third, wait, does who have a Priest problem? Oh, Hearthstone? My bad, never mind. I think you guys can figure out what this guy is insinuating. I don't need to give my take on it, but I just wanted to give him a personal shout out, because every single post that I make, he always has some sort of hilarious answer. And that's actually part of the reason why I decided to put in these posts. Best and funny answers will be featured in the video, because I like it when people go in a different direction than just being serious all the time. So if you ever find something funny or something punny that you want to leave in my posts, guys, I definitely welcome it. Flame is saying to make a passive hero power that Priest can only play up against Priest. Luckily, if you're not a caster, you won't have to deal with casting this every single time. But regardless, Priest going up against Priest is just going to be an absolute heaven for anyone who's a Priest main, and everybody else doesn't have to worry about the class. So just like that, we're back to our 9 classes in Hearthstone. Jonathan is just saying to just delete it. Just burn it to the ground. Make sure that you never even find any remnants of the class, because this is just what the kind of vibe that I get from this gift. So maybe we need to just burn the class, and it'll all be okay. Outcast, however, is saying that raise dead to 2 mana or resurrect 1 minion that died this game. Apotheosis this turn only. That actually is the first time I've seen that. That would be kind of interesting to see. Draconic Studies, discover a dragon that costs 6 or less. The next dragon you play costs 1 or less. I don't think Draconic Studies really needs to be changed. However, I can understand some people's frustration with the card. The issue is just dragons are always going to be good. Maybe if you make it to a dragon that costs 6 or less, it kind of balances it out. But then you have cards like Brightwing, which can find you random legendaries. Even though it's not consistent, maybe some people will find that more annoying. Palm Reading, discount 3 spells in your hand by 1. Another suggestion that was given by Casey, actually. So maybe this can be done. I don't know. It can definitely be coded. It just seems a little bit weird in terms of being able to really change the card. But I actually kind of like a lot of these ideas. The Apotheosis to this turn only is probably one thing I've literally never thought about until I actually saw this post. And that's one thing I like about doing with these videos, is that I see suggestions or recommendations that I literally have never thought of, and it makes me think about Hearthstone a little bit more critically. But yeah, Apotheosis to this turn only might just be the way to go, because then you can keep the card exactly as it is, but it only has that one swing turn, which I feel like is fine. It's just when that one swing turn becomes three swing turns fully healing your hero from like one digit, that's when it becomes a problem. All right, so let's go ahead and knock out the rest of these replies. Alex is saying to just delete the class entirely so we can have our 9 classes back. And this is actually the last one that I wanted to talk about, because this is something that I can definitely understand. Shade is saying, is this a joke? Leave Priest alone. And he's looking at HS replay win rates across, I think this is, across Americas. The issue with looking at these stats and saying that Priest is bad, or is saying that Priest is definitely okay and that it doesn't need to be changed, is that most likely these stats are coming from all of the ranks. If you're ever going to look at problematic cards, yes, looking at all the ranks is definitely something that you need to do, but you also need to pay a lot of attention to what's going on at the top, because people are going to be playing the top cards or the top decks a lot whenever their rank is important to them, or they're trying to do something competitive with the game. Just looking at these stats is not indicative to what's a problem in Hearthstone. You need to look at the stats of the actual deck itself and what it's playing. So, like, unfortunately, there's just too many people that don't play Priest to the full capacity that they need to be able to win with the deck, to where it is literally curbing the win rate. So I'm going to quickly go over to HS Replay and see what the stats are right now before I continue my next point. And here they are. Here are the best decks according to HS Replay. Shaman is on top, Hunter is number 2, Demon Hunter is 3, Druid is 4th, followed by Warrior, Paladin, then Priest finally at 7th. Do you really think that so many people would be complaining about the class if it really was just number 7th according to the statistics? It's just one of those things to where, unfortunately, people just don't play Priest the way that they need to, because at the lower ranks, it is really hard to know all of the outs that you have to make, because you don't know all the options Priest has. You don't know if discovering this one card from your opponent's deck is better than the other if you've never played up against that deck before, and if you've never played Priest going up against that deck before. Sadly, you just can't look at the overall statistics like this. You need to look at specific statistics in a certain meta, or at a certain point in the ladder, because then you're going to see the best players and what they're deciding. And, well, tournament is another thing to look at. Tournament statistics is very, very important. I think 80% of Priests were banned in tournaments. You can't ignore that statistic. So, like, if statistics are so important, why are we not pulling from tournaments? So, like, as useful and as informational as HS Replay and other statistic websites can be, you cannot trust them to be the holy grail or the Bible of whatever is good right now. Because Shaman is good right now because it's good against all of the ranks. It's good at any level of play, and a newbie can actually play Shaman to an effectiveness, to a very effective playing level if they've never played it before. Like, this is just one of those things to where it's an easy aggro deck and you can just deal damage with it, and if you lost, then that kind of sucks. Same thing with Hunter, same thing with Demon Hunter, and same thing with Druid. These decks are very, very aggressive and are very proactive with their game plan, are very popular right now, so it makes sense why they're a little bit higher up. Rush Warrior is probably the only reason why Warrior's up here. I really don't know why Paladin is 6th. I think it's just kind of coasting off its stats earlier this expansion, and some people in the lower ranks are still giving it some gas, I guess. Priest and Rogue are like some of the best classes right now in the game for ladder, so I find this kind of interesting. It's probably just because Rogue doesn't have that good of a matchup against Hunter and Shaman, but that's pretty much my point with this. Like, these stats are not law. They are not. They're not indicative of what needs to be, or what needs not to be done with the game. So you got to look at your statistics a little bit fairly, and you got to know where the stats are coming from, rather than just saying, oh, Priest is 47%. Clearly, Priest isn't a problem, because it really is to a degree. Whether or not you agree with it is one thing, but Priest is kind of a problem. But yeah, that was definitely a lot of replies. Thank you guys for making it to the end of this video, and I hope that you were able to get some sort of perspective about Priest that you had not thought about before. I think my biggest takeaway here was that Apotheosis becoming a only this turn effect would be kind of interesting in order to curb the card's power level. But let's go ahead and ask Clark before we conclude this video. Does Clark think that Priest has a problem? And if so, what would I do to change the class? I think the biggest takeaway here is that Priest maybe doesn't have a problem in terms of, like, power level, but it's definitely frustrating. So, like, I would like to see Blizzard change the class in terms of giving it some active win cons and fighting more for the board rather than just generating. If it generates everything over and over and over again, it becomes the same stale, dull game experience every single time, because all you're doing is just letting Priest play Solitaire, essentially. I don't want Priest to feel like a Solitaire matchup every single time I'm playing like an aggro matchup to where, oh, they found the random AoE, they found the random healing that does a whole bunch, oh, they have their Samuro Apotheosis. There's a lot of things that Priest just does really, really well that no other class has a way of being able to counteract. So if you're going to have Priest be able to do these things, the other classes need to be able to counteract them or have something to where they can at least pressure Priest a little bit, to where Priest can't always go for the random generation. They have to go for a little bit more of smarter lines. And I feel like a lot of Priest mains do accomplish that very well, and that's the reason why the class is becoming a problem. But that's just my take on it. I think that Priest is definitely more powerful than it needs to be, but it's not necessarily about its cards being really, really good. It's just the fact that all the other decks just can't deal with what Priest can do specifically. So there's no other decks that can really generate as many resources as Priest. There's no other class that can really gain armor or gain health like Priest can. And unfortunately, Priest has so many ways of being able to come back from a really bad situation that it just doesn't really matter all the time. So I would like to see Priest have a lot more linear game plan in terms of being able to build up a board, be threatening with that board, and actively kill with that board, rather than just randomly generate, oh, I found a board because I randomly generated. But thank you again for making it to the end of this video, guys. If you do enjoy this kind of content, feel free to like this video and feel free to subscribe to the YouTube channel so you can be notified about any other future uploads we happen to come out with. We are doing discussion-based content every single day, and I ask a question on my Hearthstone Twitter literally every single morning as I wake up. So if you would like to see your replies in one of these future videos, feel free to follow the Twitter and reply to the most recent question that we have asked. But I hope you guys enjoy this kind of content. I definitely enjoy making it for you. Hopefully, we will see you guys for the next video. Peace out.